1865 Match Report.
Hello and welcome to 1865, the Nottingham Forest podcast. We're recording the morning after Nottingham Forest went away to Manchester City and, against all the odds, somehow managed to get a point. I'm joined by Katie from A View from the Clough Stand. And Katie, first of all, before we do anything else, I really want to ask you, in terms of the atmosphere, what was the mood like amongst the away fans before the game? And what was the mood like after the game?
Well, before the game, obviously, no one expects to get a point. The last 3 visits, we've been pretty poor. I think it's like 11-0 on aggregate or something like that. So, and obviously our form at the minute compared to City in a title race, you don't really expect. But sometimes you have that feeling. And the feeling was obviously right yesterday. And recently, the away ends have felt a bit poor, lacking in atmosphere, because obviously the results on the pitch aren't really helping. But yesterday, it felt like a proper away end again, and it felt like it was really nice to be in that away end, and it was nice to score a goal and have something to celebrate as well.
Well, yeah, that always helps. And for what it's worth, I think it's also worth mentioning that on the TV, it was the Forest fans that we could hear most of the way through the game. I think that was Mrs. Ferraro was saying, and she's an ex-resident of Manchester, that apparently at the Etihad, they have been known to pipe crowd noise in. So whether that says something about the nature of the fan base you get when you become a big club. Not saying anything about plastics. Let's not go there. All right, let's talk about the match then. It's worth pointing out that Forest did make the formation change that we kind of expected, didn't they? So we had Sells in goal. We had a back three of Jair Cunha, Milenkovic and Murillo, and Aina and Williams at wing back. Sangare and Anderson were joined by Dominguez in the middle of the park, and then Gibbs White was playing essentially as an auxiliary striker alongside Jesus, and obviously dropping into midfield when we were out of possession. With that team news, were you surprised at that, and was it what you thought would work?
Yeah, well, obviously at Brighton, we looked so much better when we went to the 3 at the back. And I thought going away to the Etihad that we'd probably do the same. So that wasn't really a surprise. I wouldn't say it was a surprise with the formation, but it was a surprise when the game started, because I think everyone thought that we was going to play a box midfield of Sangare and Anderson and then Dominguez and Gibbs White. But Dominguez was actually playing as a 3 with them to make us even more compact and have that shape. So that was interesting. But I think overall, with the team news, when I saw it, I wasn't too surprised.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I thought it was going to be a box. And so in a way, there's a bit of me that's kind of going, well, in that case, why not play Jesus as one of the 10s and then play Taiwo up front? But I mean, I guess going for the 5-3-2, look, City are going to play between the lines no matter what they do. I think it's also, I'm going to address an elephant in the room. So today I'm wearing my yellow shirt from the first season back in the Premier League, when we also went to Man City and tried to play 5 at the back and we got beaten 6-0. So I'm hoping that this is more reminiscent of the fighting spirit that we showed in the last leg of that season to stay up against Arsenal on that last day, than it was about the match against City. I think it's fair to say, though, City are a good team, and they had the first real chance. Antoine Semenyo getting down the left channel, hit a bullet of a shot with his left foot, and it went just the right side from our perspective of the post. Now, that's right in front of the away end. So did you think that was going in?
No, I had a really good view of it, and I think Sells might have had the post covered as well. So I always, obviously, if you give Semenyo room, like we did eventually, he's gonna do something. But no, I thought that one was going wide.
Okay. Then Forest had a chance on the break, and this kind of, it was symptomatic actually of the kind of the spirit that they were showing. It's something that Pereira talked about in his post-match interview. Dominguez broke from our half, from about halfway line. He got through. He's had Jesus peeling to his right and Morgan to his left. He chose Morgan. And Morgan did what I can only describe as a Callum-esque effort. He tried to cut across the ball with his right foot. It was going vaguely towards the bottom corner, but it's an easy save for Donnarumma to make. And yeah, I found myself thinking that a player who is in a confident mood in a team that's doing well, if that was happening, then Morgan would have let it go across his body and then let it come onto his left foot so he could fire across Donnarumma that way. Um, I mean, I'm guessing that for you in the away end, that was a moment of great excitement with a feeling of anticlimax.
Yeah, I think it might have even been a 3-on-2 or a 3-on-3.
Yeah.
And when you have Gibbs White in a good position, he normally does something. But I think the maybe he shouldn't have let it go on his right foot and took the shot he did. But I think if he does that, he has to hit it with more pace because we know the type of keeper that Donnarumma is. But kind of just rolled it into his arms, a bit like the Callum one against Wolves a few weeks ago. I just got a deja vu from that.
Yeah. Me too. Me too. Yeah, that's the reason I would have let it go across. If it's me, not that I'm any good at football, but if it's me, I'd have let the ball go across my body, and that way I could put my left foot through the ball and get some power on it. However, we were left to rue that because City then scored. They had a break down the right-hand channel. The ball was crossed to the penalty spot, and as you mentioned earlier, and it's something which we knew was going to be the case. We are talking about it in our group chat. Forest had looked a lot more solid for playing the 5-3-2, but all it takes is one lapse of concentration against City, and that came when Semenyo was on the penalty spot. Let's be honest, it was great technique, absolutely superbly taken. A player who's confident, who can use both feet in a goods team, but Sangare was the man who I noticed was, I'm not going to say he's guilty of ball watching because that makes it sound like worse than it was, but he didn't track the man.
Yeah, I think as well, yeah, Semenyo was unmarked and someone should have been close to him. But I think the whole move starts from Guehi getting forward. And Morgan, this was really unusual from Morgan. Morgan normally would have like come across to Guehi and like tried to stop him getting forward. But he kind of just was walking and jogging, letting Guehi go into that space. So the move kind of starts from that. And then obviously, yeah, when um Semenyo's free in the box, someone does need to be picking him up.
Mm. I mean, we commented on Sunday about how Sangare looked absolutely knackered against Brighton. He didn't look much better today, and certainly at the end of the match, he pulled up with cramp at the end, which led to City having the last chance of the game, which we'll come on to later on. And we were just at home, we were just kind of saying, well, he played all of AFCON, and that included periods of extra time. And then he came back and was our best player for a month after that. And he needs the rest, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think so. But it's so hard because I feel like once we go past that starting 11, we're not really the same team. And
Mm.
that midfield of Sangare and Anderson is what really makes us tick. And I think when Sangare did go off to AFCON, we really missed him, and you could definitely see that. And then when he comes back, we look much better. But I also think Anderson's a much better player when he does have Sangare
Yeah.
beside him as well. So I think it's really difficult because we need him in the side. But there's not many chances to rest him because when we're out the FA Cup, we're out the Carabao Cup, and then in the Europa Leagues, we're getting in the knockout stages where we need our strongest 11. So it's a difficult one.
Yeah, it is, and certainly you're right. There's no one else like Sangare in the squad. It's a big hole to fill, and we saw that when he was at AFCON. And I mean, I've described him as the tempo setter for this team. When Sangare's on song, then Forest have looked much better for it. Let's go back to the action. Another break, Igor Jesus breaking in a similar way to he did at Brighton when he created the goal for Morgan, but this time he had nothing in the middle, so he decided to take on the fullback himself. He cut in from the corner of the box. It was a decent effort, parried at the near post by Donnarumma. Nico tried to get onto the rebound. He was offside, and there's a coming together between Nico and I forget who it was. And this is an interesting one because it actually ended up being given as a foul against Nico. For a 50-50, both players were going for the ball, but their feet clashed or their shins clashed as they both followed through. And there was a similar incident in the second half where City were claiming a penalty. Now, I know that both of those were at the opposite end of the grounds to where you were, Katie. But yeah, those 50-50s, I kind of think, what's a player supposed to do? You can't just not have your leg there anymore, can you?
Yeah, exactly. In 50-50s, the referee should just play on. And I know they always give it in the way of the defending team, but just play on. And if it's anything serious, then it'll get escalated.
Yeah, and it's also worth pointing out, and you may not have seen this, but because you were down the other end of the ground. But as a result of that, Nico actually ended up with the Man City player's studs hitting him on the shin. So there's a bit of claret there. He had to be bandaged up. It's one of those really, really painful ones because it's right on the shin. I'm just going to point out that players should wear proper shin pads like I did in the 90s and noughties, and it would still have been painful, but he wouldn't have got cut. So yeah, that's just worth pointing out. Okay, and then City had what was the best effort of the remainder of the half. It was more pressure. Haaland got down into the inside left channel. He tried to round Sells. The angle was too tight. I think Sells did a really good job of making himself big and pushing Haaland wide, and then also meant that Murillo could cover. He was actually covering the near post by the time that Haaland got the shot in. But Haaland's such a presence. There must have been a few nerves when you saw him going into that position.
Yeah, whenever Haaland's on the ball, because of his pace, the way he gets forward, and his finishing ability whenever he's on the ball, you just immediately panic. But as you said, Sells and Murillo did well to get back, and I think holding on till half time, going in 1-0 was really crucial to the final result.
The 1865 match report.
Okay, so for the second half, there were no changes in personnel, but City did press us. And at one point in the early stage of the second half, the TV put up the possession stats, and I think it's 94% to City, which is absolutely ridiculous, isn't it? But and they almost made it count because Bernardo Silva cut in from the right hand side, Forest's left. And of course, we know that he's a left-footed player. So I thought that Nico and I think it was Anderson, they probably could have done more to push him out onto his right foot. But he kind of wriggled through, did a daisy cutter shot towards the far post, and it needed a hand from Sells to be able to push it wide. I think Silva probably thought he was going to score with that one.
Yeah, I mean, everything that happened up the other end of the pitch is so far away that kind of just hope that nothing happens. Like, we'll get onto it, but the last minute goal line clearance, we had no idea, and then we just see the ball like fly the other way. But we just saw that one flash wide. But on replay, it's a really great save from Sells.
Yeah, at the weekend, George was a bit critical of Sells for the goals we conceded, particularly that first goal at Brighton, saying that it's a sign that he was a bit rusty and he should have got down better to it and got a stronger hand to it. I think he redeemed himself in this match, didn't he?
Yeah, I completely agree with George. That I had, like, from the Brighton game, I had like the perfect angle. I was front row and I just watched it fly in. And Sells probably should have had a stronger hand, but I think today, apart from one pass that he tried to loft over Haaland, and
He
Haaland
forgot how tall Haaland is, didn't he?
yeah, Haaland managed to get it. I think apart from that, he did what was asked of him, and yeah, he had a decent game.
And it also speaks volumes that if that was the kind of the defensive ricket that we had, the players kind of regrouped and managed to. I mean, normally Haaland would get a shot off pretty quickly, wouldn't he? But he didn't get that chance to do it because Forest were crowding those areas pretty well. And then, as if by magic, out of almost nothing, so Ola Aina, he makes a run down the right hand channel. I think it was Dominguez who passed it to him, and it's one of those that Ola sometimes does. Kind of, I quite like because it's kind of old fashioned. He just looked in front of him and looked to where his defender was and just thought, I'm going to go for this. So got got his head up, ran, realised he was getting round Eight Nuri, got to the byline. His cross was a little bit too deep, but something that hasn't happened enough this season is that we actually had two players in the box, and the cross was a bit too deep. But Igor, with some real kind of agility, managed to head it back down, even though he was facing the wrong way at the moment that he kind of jumped for it. And then the ball went to the near post from Igor's flick on, where Morgan just decided to backheel it. He backheeled it across. I'm trying to describe this and trying to kind of think about. I'm doing it as I'm describing it to watchers and listeners. But he basically kind of crossed his leg, so he backheeled with his right boot, but across his left shin, and it megged the defender, and Donnarumma was therefore unable to react. And it was a really, really delicious goal, wasn't it?
It was so brilliant because it was right in front of us as well, so we saw it. Originally, I thought that, like you said, Ola had over hit the cross, and I thought it was just going to go out for a goal kick and another good counter attack wasted. But Jesus does really well. And then I was thinking, like, how is Morgan gonna score? Because if he turns, he has a defender like right there, and City probably clear the ball. So the instinct to back heel it, especially in the way he does, like the way he crosses his legs and it makes the defender, it was such a amazing goal, and that just shows that the quality that Gibbs White can produce when you need him to.
Who'd have thought Forest would have a goal of the month contender? It's like it's second time because Sangara's goal against Tottenham was a goal of the month contender as well. We don't score many, but occasionally they're pretty good. Um, yeah, it's just impudence. And Morgan himself afterwards, he did sort of say it was a bit, it's quite instinctive. It was one of those where he just sort of got it, like you don't think about it too much. It's like I've just got to get it in the goal. But again, that's a sign that that's a player who he's the leading scorer. We've accused him several times on this podcast of being too unselfish. And this one, he had no choice but to just, I've got to go for it because that was all that was on. So hopefully it'll give him confidence. And the goal against Brighton will give him confidence to just kind of go for it a bit more. I think that's really important. We can't afford to not when we get chances in the box. All right. It only lasted a couple of minutes though, Katie. So Haaland cut in from the right-hand side. His shot deflected off Murillo. For a second, it looked like it was going in, but it went onto the roof of the net. And then Eight Nuri took a corner, and it was really easily headed in by Rodri. And it's really frustrating because, again, it's a defensive lapse. This is something whereby Forest, over the last, certainly under Nuno, we've used zonal marking quite a lot from corners. And we all know that defending from set pieces improved quite a lot under Nuno. It wasn't very good under Steve Cooper. It definitely wasn't good under Deitch, and let's not mention the Australian. Zonal marking didn't work here because, frankly, no one picked up Rodri at all. And I've always said a zone never scored a goal, whereas a man can. And even Pereira said in his post-match interview, we need to go man-to-man in those situations. It felt like a soft one against a team like City, didn't it?
Yeah, I've never been a fan of zonal marking. I just think get your man, track your man, and they won't score. So yeah, for Rodri to be completely unmarked in the box is a really poor goal, especially when you've just gone and scored up the other end, got yourself back in the game. And a game, I wouldn't say you like we need to win because we didn't really expect to get anything out of it, but a game that you've got yourself back level in, it's a really cheap goal to concede. And I think like maybe just minutes before that, West Ham had scored against Fulham. So you're thinking, oh no, now we're in the relegation zone. And I personally, for me, I didn't think that we could come back from a goal down again, especially where we were playing.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the West Ham goal because it was a really bad couple of minutes for Forest supporters because all of a sudden, like you say, we found ourselves in the relegation zone. In the aftermath of that goal, Sells was claiming a foul. I don't know what he's claiming because he ran into, I think it was Haaland who was online, and players are allowed to stand there. It's not a problem. And Milenkovic went absolutely crazy, and he ended up squaring up with. I don't know if you saw this from where you were. It wasn't really shown that much on the TV, but he ended up squaring up to Donnarumma in the centre circle, and apparently both players got booked. And I don't know what Milenkovic was complaining about, but even after he got the yellow card, he went back to the referee and he was remonstrating, really, really kind of waving his arms and shouting and asking the referee, "What have you just done?" So, I mean, the referee obviously had an explanation. We're none the wiser, but obviously you can't square up to other players, and he got the booking for it. The thing that I find really frustrating about it is that it's not as though Rodri's a big player. He's not the tallest player. Yes, he's good in the air for a player of his size, but you shouldn't be letting a player who's not even is barely 6 foot tall win a header unchallenged in your box, should you?
No, definitely not. And especially in the position we're in, I feel like we concede so many cheap goals and so many goals that are preventable, and we don't go up the other end and score. So we need to rely on defensive solidity and especially defending set pieces. And yeah, again, we haven't. And luckily, it didn't cost us.
Yeah. Before we get onto that, I just want to come on to a couple of penalty claims for City. Now, again, I'm very aware of the fact that it was a long way away from where you were in the ground. So the first one was Haaland. He went through, he poked the ball past Sells. Sells went down to try and get it. The ball went out. There was contact. Interestingly, on the TV, when they showed one of the angles of the replay, you could see Haaland smiling as he was getting up. And I think I think that referees don't look at players' body language enough, and his body language and his facial expression suggested he knew it wasn't a penalty, that he was trying to win it by leaving his leg in. This is something that's, it comes up in football every so often, doesn't it? The striker who goes through leaves his leg dangling, and so it gets taken out. And is it a penalty or is it not? I'm just going to go back to something that I think is worth reminding ourselves in the modern era, which is that football is a contact sport and contact is allowed. So similar with those 50-50s that we talked about in the first half, I think contact is allowed. I don't think Bernardo Silva made a big thing of it in the post-match interview, but I don't think you can argue with it if it's given or not. And bearing in mind that VAR is there to clear up when the referee has missed something, it's not a surprise that VAR didn't overturn that. There's also a 50-50 that, again, in the box, Anderson, and the argument is that it's one of those that would be given outside of the box, but it needs a higher threshold in the box. Again, I'm just looking at it and going, what are players supposed to do? Both players make contact with each other, and just because you're the player who's trying to defend your goal doesn't necessarily mean that you're fouling the opponent. So I don't quite understand. And I'm just thinking that if either of those were the other way round, would I be annoyed about it? I'd probably be annoyed about the Haaland one, but I wouldn't expect anything, and I wouldn't be surprised if it wasn't given, and I wouldn't expect anything from Anderson's 50-50. It was a long way away from you, Katie. Are you able to offer any insight from what was happening in the ground?
From in the ground, obviously, when you see a keeper rush out at a striker, you always panic. And when the referee didn't give it, it was like, oh, okay. But then like immediately it like flashed up on the screens like checking possible penalty. But I've seen the replay and Haaland like kicks it one way and then he like turns the other way and forces the contact with Sells.
Yeah.
And anyway, I think the ball's already going out of play by the time the contacts happen. And then for the Anderson one, I actually think it's a foul on Anderson because Rodri kicks him, and Rodri's already had the shot, and yes, then Anderson comes in, but he's already had the shot. That play's already been decided. And Anderson's the one that ends up getting kicked. So I completely agree.
And to Bernardo Silva's comments that every 50-50 went against City. I put in our group chat this morning that Aït-Nouri didn't get a booking for ploughing through, I think it was Aina, and Murillo got booked simply for standing up when Haaland was trying to, run past him. And, like, he can't just disappear. So, two can play at that game, Bernardo. I'm just going to point that out. All right. And then the moment that we were waiting for, 76 minutes. This is notable because it's a rarity. Forest getting a goal by playing through the middle of the park. And we all know that Anderson has this in him, but he doesn't do it enough. He doesn't score enough goals, and he certainly doesn't score enough goals from the positions he gets into. This time he made it count. He played a 1-2. Callum Hudson-Odoi was on the edge of the box, laid it back. It's amazing that City left so much space on the edge of their box, but it meant that Anderson could set himself and curl the ball into the far post. Old-fashioned celebration, big knee slide in front of the away fans. It must have felt amazing.
Yeah, it was absolutely brilliant because, like I said earlier, when City scored their second, I didn't expect us to come back again, but we did, and that could end up being such a huge point at the end of the season. But the finish as well is absolutely brilliant. I don't really like Anderson or Gibbs White shooting from outside the box because they normally go either miles over or miles wide. But the way he's placed it, he's like curled it round Guehi and lovely into the bottom corner, and also the pace on it as well, because we know that Donnarumma is a big keeper and he can make brilliant saves. So the pace on it as well to get it past him, yeah, it was absolutely brilliant moment.
Okay, so then we move on to some substitutions. Taiwo came on for Jesus. We had Yates and Callum coming on for Morgan and Dominguez. And then we moved from a 5-3-2 to a 5-4-1. Worth pointing out a couple of other bits and pieces. So there was a Semenyo free kick. It was a really cheap concession. It's a Yatesy special, I'm afraid. He just barged into his player, and for all that there's something about kind of getting on a player's back and forcing them into concession, Yatesy is also a master of when a player hits him in the back going down. And in this case, he just hit his player in the back. And the referee had no option but to give a free kick. Is really, really cheap from the skipper. And Semenyo had the free kick. Player in form. It was always going to be him who was taking it. I thought Aït-Nouri might have a go because it was that side of the goal, but Semenyo had a go. Sells, what you couldn't see in the ground and at the time was that Sells actually got a fingertip to it. So it probably wouldn't have gone in, probably would have hit the bar, but it's important that he got that fingertip because it meant that it went out of play. Probably should have been a corner. So on that one, Bernardo, you're probably right. But it was a goal kick. Morato came on for Nico Williams, and we ended up with something we don't like, which is Murillo playing at left back. But I'll come back to that later. There's something else that's worth talking about, which was in stoppage time. Taiwo, he didn't get many touches of the ball, but when he did, he ran down towards the corner flag and managed to play it off Guehi to get a corner. Anderson took the corner, and this was straight out of the Stevie Cooper promotion season playbook. A corner to the near post, Yates coming in, and unfortunately, it was the Yates under Chris Hughton rather than the Yates under Stevie Cooper because he got his header wrong. It went the wrong side of the post. Again, thinking about where you were in the ground, Katie, were you half celebrating before you realised it was wide?
Yeah, to be fair, I was because we couldn't see like really the other post. So the ball was like flashed past it, and for a second you think it's in because we know that Yatesy can score some good goals with his head, but unfortunately that one wasn't to be.
Yeah, it wasn't quite his 50p head, but it's one of those where if you're going to get to the ball first and he's got the power and the height to be able to do that, yeah, he'll look back at that and think, I probably should have scored it. And that became particularly crucial because if he'd scored it, Forest would have won. And yet, in the 8th minute of 7 advertised minutes of stoppage time, then there's an almighty goalmouth scramble, and pretty much every Forest defender, all three of the centre halves are in there, and none of them could get a decent touch on it. Savino poked it towards goal. I think a couple of other City players were in there. All three of our centre halves there. Sells was on the ground. Morato tried to clear it, bounced off him. Milenkovic tried to clear it, bounced off him. Savinho poked towards goal, and Murillo from left back had seen that Sells had advanced a few yards towards the edge of his 6-yard box, and he'd positioned himself on the goal line. And the very last kick of the match, he was in the right place, the right time, like he did a couple of times last season, most notably against Man United. And that is the goal line clearance that gained Forest a valuable point that means that we're not in the relegation zone, that Man City fans will be cursing because it stopped them from gaining ground on Arsenal. But a big, big, big moment there.
Definitely. That's almost as important as a goal because it's prevented them winning in the last minute. Like I think I touched on it earlier. I honestly had no idea what was going on. I just saw loads of players in one space. I couldn't even make the ball out. And then I just see the ball go flying, and then I get loads of messages going, Murillo off the line. And I've watched it back, and it's just it's absolutely brilliant.
So we'll talk a little bit more about how that feels and what that means in just a sec.
The 1865 match report.
Okay, Katie, let's get down to brass tacks. Vitor Pereira, he talked about confidence, organisation and character. He made, and this is a quote, "We cannot select the games to get points." And I think that's really, really important because we have seen at times this season, Forest have played well against the big teams and then fallen shy in the matches against the Brightons and Fulhams of this world. He felt that the first half, this is interesting, he felt the first half was a bit conservative. And at halftime, he asked the players to break the pressure, find the space, and felt that they could score goals. And that's exactly what they did. And he mentioned, losing the point against Liverpool felt so bad. So it was really important to kind of to not concede with that last second chance. So my question to you, Katie, is given that West Ham have got their victory and they've now drawn level with us on points, does last night's result feel like a win because it was such a big performance and such a monumental kind of set of circumstances to claw ourselves back twice and to clear off the line and everything? Or does the victory by West Ham temper that in terms of, but we're still not pulling away?
I think the feeling last night was it felt like a win because, like you said, we'd come back and then the goal line clearance in the last minute, and we've been really poor at the Etihad, and it's absolutely not an easy place to go, especially when they're challenging for titles. So last night it felt like a win coming away. But I think when you look at it today, after the emotions have calmed down a bit and you look at it from the bigger picture, we're only out of the relegation zone on goal difference. So West Ham, I think, have City then Villa coming up.
Yep.
And we have Fulham and Spurs, and Fulham are a bogey side, but we've beaten them at home before, and Spurs away, we won there last season, and Spurs could be in real trouble. We might not even be talking about West Ham soon. We might be talking about Tottenham being in that relegation zone. So I think with these two games coming up, our difficulty of fixtures compared to West Ham's difficulty of fixtures, we absolutely need to take this chance, or we're going to be in more trouble than I think we are now.
Yeah, Jeremy pointed out in our group chat that Fulham are our bogey team, and they proved that by losing against West Ham. They had a penalty which was given and then rescinded, and then they conceded what was frankly a comedy goal to West Ham. Thinking about West Ham, I mean, from the perspective of the fact that Nuno just about got us to escape relegation 2 seasons ago, it feels a bit like that again, but for West Ham, in that they're doing enough to stay in touch, and even though they're not out of danger, they are finding a different level of resilience maybe that they had before, and that feels a little bit like what it was with Nuno at Forest, where that first half season, it wasn't pretty. It felt like we were really struggling to get ourselves safe, but in the end we just did enough.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that. I think the biggest heartbreak would be if obviously Nuno sent us down after getting us Europe. But I think West Ham, they've picked up. No, they've not picked up, but they've looked a little bit better and they're starting to show some fight. But I also think after last night, if we continue to show the fight that we did yesterday and show that character, show that confidence, then I think we'll be the ones to stay out of it.
Yeah, let's hope so. I mean, worth pointing out that at the moment, Wolves are the form team in the bottom six, and also that Spurs are apparently quite comfortably the least informed team in the entire division. They haven't won for something like 11 or 12 matches. So let's hope Dr. Forrest don't give them the remedy in a couple of weeks' time. Lastly, worth pointing out, well, two things I want to point out. So one is to do with the players. Elliot Anderson was interviewed on Radio Nottingham and he finished the interview because Colin Frey said, okay, you've got a few days rest now before the Midtjylland game. And he just said, yeah, we need it. I mean, they managed to preserve their energy much better last night, didn't they? By sitting a bit deeper, letting City have the ball. The overall possession stats in the end were 70-30. They didn't chase around unnecessarily, which maybe they were probably, although the first half against Liverpool was brilliant, they knackered themselves out for the second half, didn't they? So hopefully a rest will do some good. And unlike under Deitch, when every time we did have a week off, they came back and looked worse. Again, from our group chat, we're saying, well, the players aren't going to be doing the bleep test all the time. They're not going to be run into the ground. I think Vitor's probably going to give them a good rest and then talk about things that they can do to kind of maximize their potential rather than get them to do loads and loads of drills.
Yeah. I also think it gives Pereira time to implement a little bit of his playing style because you're not going to fully implement it in, what do we have left, like nine games. But it gives him time to implement a little bit of that, and I think we are already starting to see it, but we've now got a week to work on it. And because the fixtures have been quite congested, I think we've played like 5 games under him now and he's not been here that long.
5 games in just over 2 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I think the players need a rest, especially with the fight and the energy and the hard work that they're going to have to put in for the rest of the season. But it also gives time for some of Pereira's ideas to be implemented.
Yeah. I'm just going to finish off. Last word goes to Stephen Topless of this podcast, who said that last night's match aged him about 10 years. To which my response was thoughts and prayers for all of those of you who were in the ground. I mean, by the time you got home last night, Katie, you must have felt like you'd been, I don't know, on a world tour or something, like being out on the lash for 2 weeks in a row, or something. But it was a big night, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously the first half was quite a hard watch. I wouldn't say hard watch, but City were dominating, and obviously they score. And whenever we've conceded at the Etihad, we haven't been able to turn it around and go our way. And then the emotion completely changes when Morgan scores, and then a few minutes later they score again, and then Anderson scores to give you hope. But then you can't even really celebrate that goal because you're just completely panicking for the last 20 minutes. But when the final whistle was blown, it was a really good feeling.
Yeah, and as you say, 9 more games to go on the Premier League emotional roller coaster. Thank you very much to Katie. You can find her writings at A View from the Clough Stand. Search for that on social media and on the web. And in the meantime, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for watching, and come on, you Reds.